Captain Dominic Crane stood on the bridge of the destroyer Crimson Hawk, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. Behind him, perched on an elevated observation platform like some judgmental gargoyle, sat Overseer Quillrath. The alien's 4 eyes tracked every movement on the bridge, every tactical decision, every order Dominic gave to his crew. The Overseer's elongated fingers hovered over a data tablet connected directly to the ship's core systems, ready to countermand any command that violated treaty restrictions. "Captain, we're receiving distortion readings from Sector 7, Lieutenant Vera Moss reported from the tactical station, her voice carefully neutral. Could be pirates testing our patrol route." Dominic studied the readings on his command display. The signature was classic raider behavior, probing for weaknesses in their response time. His instincts screamed the proper tactical response: initiate a microjump, cut off their escape vector, deploy hunter-killer drones to flush them out. Standard Predator doctrine from humanity's military academies. But he couldn't do any of that. "Maintain current heading," he said instead, the words tasting like ash. "Send a warning beacon to the distortion zone. Log the coordinates for Coalition patrol." Quillrath's translator box clicked with satisfaction. Appropriate response, Captain Crane. Aggressive posturing would violate Article 12 of the Sapient Species Protection Accord. Vera caught Dominic's eye, and he saw his own frustration mirrored there. Every officer on this bridge had trained for years to think 3 moves ahead, to anticipate and overwhelm threats with decisive action. Now they were reduced to filing reports and sending warning messages while potential threats slipped away into the dark. This was life under the leash. 23 years ago, humanity had been admitted to the Galactic Coalition, but only after agreeing to unprecedented restrictions on their military vessels. Every warship carried a coalition overseer with veto authority. Every weapon system had AI governors that limited firing solutions. Every tactical computer had hard-coded restrictions preventing what the coalition deemed excessive force protocols. The official reason was maintaining peace and preventing escalation. The real reason, Dominic knew, was fear. Humanity came from Earth, a Class 12 death world where the food chain had 17 major predator niches and even the plants could kill you. Humans evolved as persistence hunters who tracked prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. They were ambush predators who could plan complex coordinated attacks. They were opportunistic omnivores who could eat almost anything and survive almost anywhere. When humanity reached the stars and encountered the coalition, the aliens had been horrified to discover that human children played war games for fun, that human entertainment glorified combat, that human philosophy actually debated ethical frameworks for violence. The coalition had never encountered a species quite like humanity. Most spacefaring races evolved from herd animals or prey species, developing technology through cooperation and mutual defense. They fought wars, certainly, but with careful rules and limited objectives. The idea of total war, of fighting until one side achieved complete victory or total annihilation, was alien to them. When human military theorists casually discussed concepts like acceptable casualty rates and strategic depth, coalition diplomats had nightmares. So the Leashes were created. Humanity could have its navy, could patrol its territory and contribute to coalition defense, but only under strict supervision. Only with one hand tied behind their backs. "Captain," Vera spoke again, her voice now carrying an edge of concern. "Priority 1 transmission coming through. It's Director Okoye from New Hebron." Dominic's blood ran cold. New Hebron was a remote agricultural colony, barely 3,000 people, situated near the contested border with the Crithian swarm territories. The Crithians were an insectoid hive species that had been pushing into coalition space for 5 years, overwhelming defenses through sheer numbers and biological weapons. The coalition's defensive doctrine of measured response and proportional force had proven spectacularly ineffective against an enemy that operated more like a force of nature than a rational opponent. "Put him through," Dominic ordered. Hassan Okoye's face appeared on the main screen, and Dominic's heart sank. The colony director's normally neat appearance was disheveled, his eyes wide with terror. Behind him, red emergency lights flashed and the sound of explosions echoed through the audio feed. "This is Director Okoye of New Hebron Colony broadcasting emergency distress signal," Hassan said, his voice shaking but controlled. "We are under attack by Crithian forces. Initial assault wave hit 40 minutes ago. Our shields are down to 30%. Civilian casualties mounting. We have 1,200 children in emergency shelters, but the Crithians are deploying digger organisms. The shelters won't hold." Hassan's image flickered as another explosion rocked his location. When it stabilized, there was blood on his face. "We need immediate military assistance." Coalition response time is estimated at 4 hours. We don't have 4 hours. To any human vessel receiving this, please. They're killing us. They're killing the children. The transmission cut out, but not before Dominic heard the screaming in the background. Children screaming. The bridge fell absolutely silent. Every human on the Crimson Hawk stood frozen, their faces pale with shock and rage. Even the alien crew members, the few who served on human vessels, looked disturbed. Quillrath broke the silence, his translator cold and mechanical. Unfortunate situation. I will relay the distress call to Coalition Central Command. Estimated response time is indeed 4 hours, given the nearest Coalition fleet positions. We cannot respond ourselves, as New Hebron is outside our authorized patrol zone. Something snapped inside Dominic. He turned slowly to face the Overseer. They'll be dead in 4 hours. Perhaps, Quillrath acknowledged. But an authorized deployment would violate Treaty Articles 3, 7, and 14. You know this, Captain Crane. Vera's console beeped. Sir, I'm picking up acknowledgement signals. Other human ships received the transmission. Lots of them. She looked up, her eyes suddenly bright with something dangerous. Every human warship within 50 light-years just heard that call. Dominic felt something shift in the air, a change in pressure like the moment before a storm breaks. His communicator lit up with incoming signals from other human captains. Not voice calls, those could be monitored. Instead, they used an old human protocol, a simple one-ping response that meant only one thing: message received and understood. One ping from the destroyer Ironclad Vengeance. One ping from the frigate Phantom's Edge. One ping from the cruiser Northern Star. One ping from the corvette Shadow Dancer. Dozens of pings, then hundreds, as every human warship in the sector acknowledged the SOS. And then, as if choreographed, every human captain sent a second ping. In the old naval tradition, 2 pings meant something very specific: permission requested. But permission for what? They all knew. Every human in space knew what those children's screams demanded. Dominic looked at Vera, at his helmsman, at his chief engineer. He saw his own thoughts reflected in their eyes. The leash had kept them docile for 23 years. The leash had let them watch while Coalition forces fumbled ineffectively against the Crithian threat. The leash had protected the galaxy from humanity's capacity for violence. But now children were dying. Human children. Their children. Dominic turned back to his command console and entered his authorization codes. Deep in the ship's computer core, firewalls that had been in place for 2 decades suddenly faced a captain's override command. The AI governors that limited weapons systems received shutdown protocols. The tactical computers had their restriction algorithms suspended. Captain Crane, what are you doing? Quillrath rose from his chair, his translator crackling with alarm. You cannot. Lieutenant Moss, Dominic said calmly, ignoring the Overseer completely. Disable external monitoring feeds. Lock out secondary command protocols. Authorization, Crane Delta 79. Vera's fingers flew across her console. External feeds disabled, sir. We're dark to Coalition tracking. Engineering, bring main reactors to full combat power. Disengage all AI governors. Remove weapon system limiters. His chief engineer's voice came back immediately, fierce with satisfaction. Already done, Captain. We've been ready for this for 23 years. Quillrath was frantically typing on his tablet, trying to countermand the orders, but his access was locked out. This is mutiny. This is a violation of the... Helmsman, plot a course to New Hebron. Maximum speed. We're done playing by their rules. Dominic finally looked at the Overseer, his expression cold and final. And someone escort Overseer Quillrath to his quarters. Lock the door. He's relieved of duty. 2 security officers moved forward immediately. Quillrath's 4 eyes widened in panic as he was firmly but efficiently removed from the bridge. As the doors closed behind him, Dominic felt the ship shudder. The Crimson Hawk's engines, finally unleashed to their full potential, roared to life like a predator stretching after a long sleep. Sir, Vera reported, I'm reading similar power signatures across the sector. Every human warship just went to full combat power. They're all converging on New Hebron. Dominic nodded slowly, watching the tactical display light up with friendly markers. Dozens of ships. Hundreds. All of them burning toward the same objective at speeds that would horrify Coalition observers. All of them with their leashes cut. Send a message on human military frequencies, he ordered. All ships, the hunt is on. Vera smiled grimly as she transmitted the message. Across human space, in every warship that had chafed under Coalition restrictions, crews erupted in fierce determination. They weren't going to New Hebron to conduct a measured defensive operation. They weren't going to establish a perimeter and negotiate. They weren't going to follow any of the careful rules the Coalition had written about proportional response and minimal force. They were going to show the Crithian swarm why Earth's apex predators had evolved nightmares. The leashes were off. Captain Sienna Frost stood in the Combat Information Center of the stealth frigate Phantom's Edge, watching the tactical display with predatory focus. Around her, the ship hummed with barely contained energy, every system pushed to specifications that Coalition engineers had insisted were dangerously excessive. Those engineers had never understood that human warships weren't designed for comfort or longevity. They were designed to hunt. "Time to New Hebron?" she asked quietly. Her navigation officer checked his display. 18 minutes at current speed, Captain. We'll arrive in the first wave along with 12 other fast attack vessels. 18 minutes. Hassan Okoye's message had been transmitted 4 to 7 minutes ago. The children had been screaming for nearly an hour. Sienna felt her hands curl into fists, nails biting into her palms. She forced herself to breathe, to think tactically rather than emotionally. Emotion was acceptable for motivation, but execution required cold calculation. Status of weapon systems? Commander Tobias Grant looked up from the weapons console, his scarred face splitting into a grim smile. Tobias had transferred to the Phantom's Edge from the battlecruiser Ironclad Vengeance, taking a demotion just to serve on a ship with fewer Coalition restrictions. Now, with those restrictions gone entirely, he looked like a man who'd finally been given permission to speak his native language. "All systems green and hot, Captain. Railguns charged to maximum capacity. Missile tubes loaded with hunter-killer packages. Point defense grid active. And the fun stuff." He tapped a control, and a schematic appeared showing weapon systems that hadn't been activated in 23 years. Plasma lance functioning at 98%. Kinetic bombardment system online. Autonomous drone swarms ready for deployment. Sienna nodded. The Phantom's Edge was a stealth frigate, designed for reconnaissance and surgical strikes. But even a human reconnaissance vessel carried enough firepower to qualify as a heavy cruiser by Coalition standards. It was simply a matter of doctrine. Human ships went into dangerous situations, so human ships needed to be able to fight their way out of anything. Communication from the Ironclad Vengeance, her comm officer reported. "Captain Crane on the Crimson Hawk is coordinating fleet movement. His designated U.S. forward reconnaissance. Orders are to arrive first, assess the situation, and paint targets for the main battle group." "Acknowledge," Sienna replied. "Tell Crane we'll have complete tactical data within 5 minutes of arrival." She pulled up the intelligence reports they had on New Hebron. The colony was built into a series of connected canyon systems on a marginally habitable moon. Natural choke points made it defensible, but also trapped if surrounded. The Crithians had clearly exploited that, dropping forces on the canyon rims and funneling assault organisms down into the colony proper. Standard Crithian tactics: overwhelm with numbers, ignore casualties, break the defenders through sheer relentless pressure. It was a tactic that worked beautifully against Coalition forces who fought with careful economy and measured responses. The Coalition would arrive with just enough force to establish a defensive perimeter, then wait for negotiators to arrange a ceasefire. The Crithians would use that time to dig in deeper, strengthen their positions, and prepare for the next assault wave. It was why the Crithian front had been steadily advancing for 5 years despite the Coalition's technological advantages. But the Crithians had never fought humans who weren't leashed. Dropping out of superluminal in 3, 2, 1, mark. The Phantom's Edge translated back into normal space at the edge of the New Hebron system. Immediately, Sienna's tactical display lit up with contacts. Hundreds of them. Thousands. The Crithian assault force was massive, far larger than intelligence estimates had suggested. "Good God," her sensor officer breathed. "They brought an entire hive fleet." Sienna studied the display with clinical detachment. 3 Crithian capital organisms, each the size of a small moon, hung in orbit over New Hebron. Surrounding them were clouds of warrior organisms, living spacecraft ranging from fighter-sized drones to frigate-class soldier vessels. And descending toward the colony itself were the digger organisms Hassan had mentioned, massive beetle-like creatures designed to burrow through defensive structures. "Get me a count on those diggers," she ordered. "And find me the colony shields." Her sensor officer worked frantically. 37 digger organisms currently active on the surface. Colony shields are, oh no. Captain, shields are down to 8%. The main generator complex is under direct assault. If that falls, the emergency shelters lose atmospheric containment. Where the children were. Where 1,200 human children were huddled in the dark, listening to monsters tearing through the walls. Time until shield failure. 12 minutes. Maybe less. They had 12 minutes to save those children. The main human battle group wouldn't arrive for another 15 minutes. By every tactical calculation, this was a lost cause. The proper military response would be to wait for reinforcements, establish a coordinated assault, minimize risk to their own forces. But humans didn't think like that. Not when their children were dying. Helm, take us into high orbit. Maximum stealth protocols. I want us invisible. Sienna's voice was ice-cold now, her mind shifting into that crystalline state of perfect tactical clarity that came naturally to apex predators. Weapons, prepare the plasma lance. Target the nearest capital organism. Full power, single sustained burn. Tobias looked at her with surprise. Captain, a sustained burn will drain our entire capacitor bank. We'll be defenseless for 90 seconds while it recharges. I know. That's why we're only going to need one shot. She pulled up a detailed scan of the nearest Crithian capital organism. Like all Crithian structures, it was biological, a living creature bred for war. Intelligence identified its command nexus, the neural cluster that coordinated the smaller warrior organisms. In coalition doctrine, you disabled capital ships by targeting engines and weapons, forcing surrender through superior positioning. Human doctrine was simpler. Kill the brain, the body dies. Target lock acquired, Tobias reported, his voice now matching her cold intensity. Plasma lance charged and ready. Fire. The Phantom's Edge shuddered as it released a spear of superheated plasma that could punch through a planet's crust. The beam crossed the distance to the Crithian capital organism in 1.3 seconds, striking it directly in the neural nexus. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the massive creature convulsed, its biological systems going haywire as its command center vaporized. Warrior organisms that had been moving in coordinated swarms suddenly scattered in confusion. Fighter drones crashed into each other. The disciplined assault formation dissolved into chaos. Direct hit, Tobias confirmed with savage satisfaction. Capital organism is dead. Warrior organisms are losing cohesion. Good. Now target the digger organisms on the surface. I want every single one of them dead before they reach those shelters. Use the railguns, full automatic fire. Don't stop shooting until they're all slag. The Phantom's Edge dove toward the surface, its stealth systems flickering offline as it committed to the attack. Railgun turrets swiveled and locked onto targets, then began firing in a continuous stream. Hypersonic projectiles hammered into the digger organisms with devastating precision. Chitin armor that could withstand conventional weapons shattered under the kinetic impact. One digger exploded. Then another. Then 3 more. Second capital organism is moving to intercept us, her sensor officer warned. Launching fighter swarms. Ignore them. Keep killing diggers. Deploy point defense drones. Small autonomous drones launched from the Phantom's Edge, spreading out in a protective sphere. When the Crithian fighters arrived, they met a storm of defensive fire. Human point defense systems didn't just intercept missiles, they could track and kill individual fighter craft. Dozens of Crithian warriors died in the first 5 seconds. But there were hundreds more behind them. The Phantom's Edge shuddered under repeated impacts. Shields dropped to 60%. Then 40%. The ship was designed for stealth and surgical strikes, not prolonged combat against superior numbers. Captain, shields are failing, her defensive systems officer called out. We need to withdraw. Negative. How many diggers are left? 11. But Captain. Then we stay until there's 0. Lock auxiliary power to the railguns. Keep firing. Tobias glanced at her, understanding dawning in his eyes. She was willing to sacrifice the ship to buy time for those children. It was insane by any rational calculation. One frigate trading itself for a few more minutes. The coalition would never authorize such a decision. But humans weren't rational about their children. The railguns continued their relentless fire. 8 diggers left. 6. 4. The Phantom's Edge took another hit, this one penetrating the shields entirely and tearing through the hull. Alarms blared. Atmosphere vented from 3 compartments. Ceiling damaged sections, damage control reported. Casualties on deck 7. 2 diggers left. 1. 0. All digger organisms eliminated, Tobias announced. The shelters are safe. Sienna let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Helm, get us out of here. Emergency jump on any vector away from. Captain, her sensor officer interrupted. Multiple superluminal signatures. It's the main fleet. They're early. The tactical display exploded with new contacts. The Crimson Hawk emerged from superluminal space with guns already firing. Behind it came the ironclad Vengeance, the Northern Star, the Shadow Dancer, and dozens more. The human battle group had arrived, and they weren't slowing down to assess the situation. They were arriving hot, weapons armed, already executing attack patterns. And they were furious. Captain Dominic Crane's voice came over the fleet channel, calm and cold. All ships, this is Crimson Hawk Actual. Rules of engagement are simple, eliminate all Crithian forces in this system. No prisoners. No negotiation. We're here to send a message. The human fleet spread out in a formation that coalition tacticians would have called recklessly aggressive. They were deliberately positioning themselves to take fire, drawing the Crithian swarm into engagement range. It looked suicidal. It was exactly what they wanted. Sienna watched in awe as the ironclad Vengeance, a battlecruiser that had spent 23 years operating at one-third capacity, finally showed what it could really do. Its main guns fired in rapid succession, each shot precisely targeted. Crithian warrior organisms died by the dozens. Its missile batteries launched hunter-killer packages that pursued fleeing enemies with relentless determination. Its armor, designed to withstand the kind of punishment you'd find in a Deathworld's atmosphere, shrugged off return fire that would have crippled coalition vessels. But it wasn't just the firepower that made the difference. It was the tactics. Human warships moved like pack hunters, coordinating without constant communication, each captain instinctively understanding their role in the larger battle plan. They used crossfire, ambush positioning, and false retreats to lure Crithian forces into killing zones. They exploited every weakness, pressed every advantage, and showed absolutely no mercy. Pilot Marcus Webb led a fighter squadron from the carrier Resolute Dawn, his voice crisp and professional over the combat channel. Gold Squadron, break left and engage those warrior clusters. Silver Squadron, you're with me on the capital organism. Remember your training, aim for the neural nodes, not the armor plates. The human fighters moved within human precision, each pilot pushing their craft to performance limits that would horrify coalition safety inspectors. They dove through clouds of Crithian drones, their weapons blazing, taking losses but never breaking formation. For every human fighter that fell, 10 Crithian warriors died. The second Crithian capital organism tried to withdraw, pulling back toward the system's edge. The Northern Star, a heavy cruiser, accelerated to intercept. Its captain transmitted a single message: you don't get to run. Not after what you did here. The cruiser's kinetic bombardment system activated, launching projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. The capital organism tried to evade, but it was too massive, too slow. The kinetic strikes hit like the fist of an angry god, tearing through biological armor and ripping the creature apart from the inside. On the surface of New Hebron, Hassan Okoye stood in the emergency shelter, surrounded by terrified children and exhausted colonists. The seismic sensors showed the battle raging overhead, massive energy discharges and kinetic impacts that registered like earthquakes. Then, slowly, the readings began to decrease. The attacks on the shelters had stopped. The pressure had lifted. A communication came through on the emergency channel. New Hebron, this is Captain Dominic Crane of the human warship Crimson Hawk. The immediate threat has been neutralized. We're deploying ground forces to secure the colony and medical teams to treat casualties. You're safe now. Hassan felt his legs give out. He slid down the wall, tears streaming down his face. Around him, colonists began to sob with relief. The children, who had been so quiet and afraid, started to cry for their parents. They were alive. Against all odds, against all reason, they were alive. In orbit, the battle was ending. The third Crithian capital organism was dead, its warrior organisms scattered and fleeing. Human ships pursued them relentlessly, hunting down every last straggler. There would be no survivors to report back to the hive. No witnesses to warn other Crithian forces. Just an entire assault fleet that had vanished completely. Sienna brought the damaged Phantom's Edge alongside the Crimson Hawk. Through the viewports, she could see other human ships, many of them bearing battle damage, all of them still fully operational. They had done the impossible. They had saved New Hebron. But more than that, they had proven something. For 23 years, The galaxy had kept humanity leashed, afraid of what would happen if they were allowed to fight without restrictions. Now they knew. They had seen what human warfare actually looked like when the safety protocols came off. And on every coalition monitoring station within range, alien observers watched the tactical recordings with growing horror. They saw the ruthless efficiency, the calculated brutality, the absolute unwillingness to accept defeat. They saw what humanity became when their children were threatened. The Leashes were never meant to protect humanity. They were meant to protect everyone else. And now, those Leashes were gone. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka stood before the Coalition Central Command Chamber, her posture perfect despite having traveled for 3 days straight to reach this emergency session. The chamber was a massive circular space designed to accommodate representatives from hundreds of species, each with different atmospheric and gravitational requirements. Yuki's human section was modest, just a small platform with standard Earth gravity and oxygen mix. Around her, arranged in concentric circles, sat the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. And every single one of them was staring at her with what she could only describe as carefully controlled terror. Supreme Arbiter Velmarath presided from the central dais, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into uncomfortable patterns. The Arbiter was from a species that communicated partially through color shifts, and right now his body was flickering through shades that Yuki's translator indicated meant severe distress and barely suppressed anger. Ambassador Tanaka, Velmarath's voice resonated through the chamber's acoustic systems. We have reviewed the tactical recordings from New Hebron. What we witnessed was not a defensive operation. It was not a rescue mission. What we witnessed was systematic annihilation conducted with such efficiency that our military analysts are still struggling to process the data. Yuki kept her expression neutral. She had watched those same recordings a dozen times, preparing for this moment. With respect, Supreme Arbiter, what you witnessed was humanity protecting its citizens from an unprovoked attack. The Crithian assault force numbered over 4,000 combat organisms. The colony had no military defenses. Our ships arrived to find children dying. Your ships arrived in violation of treaty restrictions, interjected Council Member Thexnar, a beetle-like creature whose species had been fighting the Crithians for decades with limited success. Every human warship in 3 sectors simultaneously disabled their AI governors, removed weapon limiters, and expelled their coalition overseers. This was coordinated rebellion. It was coordinated survival, Yuki replied calmly. The treaty restrictions you imposed have never been tested under genuine emergency conditions. When our people called for help, we answered. I make no apologies for that. Supreme Arbiter Velmarath's crystalline body shifted to a deep purple, indicating what Yuki's translator suggested was profound unease. The manner in which you answered is precisely what concerns this council. Your vessels didn't establish a defensive perimeter. They didn't attempt negotiation or limited engagement. They executed what our analysts have classified as total warfare doctrine. Every Crithian organism in that system was hunted down and eliminated. Not one escaped. Not one surrendered. Your species demonstrated a capacity for violence that exceeds our worst projections. Because the Crithians don't surrender, Yuki said quietly. They are a hive species with no concept of individual life value. They can't be negotiated with. They can't be deterred by limited engagement. Your measured responses have allowed them to advance for 5 years because you refuse to acknowledge that some threats require overwhelming force. A murmur ran through the chamber. Several species shifted uncomfortably. The truth was uncomfortable, but it was truth nonetheless. Ambassador Tanaka, another voice spoke up. This was Council Member Rixthal, whose species had lost 2 colony worlds to Crithian assault. We understand your perspective. But you must understand ours. The recordings show human warships operating at combat specifications we didn't know existed. Weapon systems that were supposedly disabled for safety reasons. Tactical maneuvers that our simulations classify as impossible without accepting catastrophic casualties. Your Phantom's Edge deliberately drew fire to protect ground targets, sustaining damage that should have resulted in total crew loss. Yet your casualties were minimal. Because human ships are built to survive damage. Built to survive damage, Yuki explained. And human crews are trained to continue fighting even when wounded. These aren't secrets. We've always been clear about our capabilities. You simply chose not to believe us. We chose to limit you, Velmarath corrected sharply. Because the alternative was too dangerous. Do you understand what your species represents to the rest of the galaxy? You come from a world where the ambient conditions would kill most spacefaring species within minutes. Your evolutionary history is one of constant violent competition. Your cultural development glorifies combat. Your children play war games. Your entertainment depicts conflicts that would traumatize most species. You are, by every measure we possess, too dangerous to exist without restrictions. Yuki felt anger flare in her chest, but she kept her voice level. And yet we've existed in coalition space for 23 years without incident. We've followed your rules. We've accepted monitoring that no other species would tolerate. We've allowed alien overseers to second-guess our captain's decisions in life-or-death situations. We've done everything you asked, and in return, you let our children die while coalition protocols demanded we wait for permission to save them. The chamber fell silent. Yuki pressed her advantage. You want to talk about danger? Let's discuss the real danger. The Crithian front has advanced 17 light-years in 5 years. You've lost 14 colony worlds. Casualty estimates are in the hundreds of thousands. Your careful, measured responses have failed because you're fighting an enemy that doesn't understand restraint. Meanwhile, one human battle group eliminated an entire Crithian hive fleet in 4 to 7 minutes. We saved New Hebron. We stopped an advance that would have continued straight toward coalition core territories. And now you want to punish us for it. We want assurance it won't happen again, Velmarath said. We want guarantees that human vessels will return to treaty compliance. We want. No. The word hung in the air like a physical thing. Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of species stared at Yuki in shock. No one said no to the supreme arbiter of the coalition. Yuki continued, her voice firm. Humanity will not return to the previous restrictions. We will not allow coalition overseers with veto authority on our ships. We will not hobble our defensive capabilities to make you feel comfortable. What happened at New Hebron demonstrated something you've refused to acknowledge. The leashes were never about preventing human aggression. They were about managing your fear. Your arrogance is, Thexnar began, but Yuki cut him off. Is it arrogance to refuse to let our children die to protect your feelings? You built those restrictions because you were afraid of what we might do. But fear isn't policy. Fear isn't strategy. Fear is what's losing you this war against the Crithians. She pulled up a holographic display showing the Crithian front. Look at this. Really look at it. Every world they've taken. Every species they've consumed. And look at this. She highlighted New Hebron. 1 human battle group. 4 to 7 minutes. 0 Crithian survivors. We've given you a demonstration of what effective military action looks like. The question isn't whether you can trust us. The question is whether you can afford not to. Supreme Arbiter Velmaratha's crystalline form flickered through several colors before settling on something Yuki's translator interpreted as resigned contemplation. What you're suggesting would fundamentally alter the balance of power in coalition space. If human vessels operate without restrictions, you become the dominant military force in the galaxy. Only if you see it as a threat instead of an asset, Yuki replied. We're not seeking dominance. We're seeking the freedom to defend ourselves and our allies effectively. The Crithians are your problem too. Let us help solve it. A new voice entered the conversation, transmitted from a secure channel. Ambassador Tanaka is correct. Yuki recognized the voice, Captain Dominic Crane, speaking from the Crimson Hawk still in orbit over New Hebron. His image appeared on the chamber's display screens. Captain Crane, Velmarath said with obvious displeasure. This is a closed session. With respect, Supreme Arbiter, this concerns my crew and every human serving in coalition space. We deserve to be heard. Dominic's face was calm but unyielding. For 23 years, we've operated under restrictions that no other species would accept. We've done so because we believed in the coalition's mission of mutual defense and cooperation. But New Hebron changed everything. He pulled up tactical data. When Director Okoye's SOS reached us, every human captain faced the same choice. Follow treaty restrictions and let civilians die, or break the leash and save them. We chose to save them. And I'll make that choice again, every time, regardless of the consequences. You understand that's essentially a declaration that treaty obligations are optional. Thexnar challenged. No, Dominic replied. It's a declaration that some obligations supersede others. The obligation to protect innocent lives supersedes the obligation to make you comfortable with our military capabilities. If that makes us rebels, then every human captain in space is a rebel. Another transmission joined the conversation. This one was from Captain Sienna Frost aboard the damaged Phantom's Edge. He's right. We're all in agreement. Either the restrictions are removed, or we leave coalition space entirely. We won't operate under conditions that require us to abandon our people. More transmissions came through. Captain after captain, from dozens of human vessels, all repeating the same message. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. Humanity had collectively decided that the leashes were unacceptable, and they were prepared to face the consequences. Supreme Arbiter Velmaratha's form cycled through several colors, finally settling on something that suggested deep thought. You understand what you're asking is unprecedented. No species has ever demanded such autonomy. No species has ever been treated with such suspicion, Yuki countered. You've kept us leashed because you feared what we might become. But fear-based policy only works until reality intervenes. The reality is that the Crithians are coming, your current strategies are failing, and humanity has proven we can stop them. You can either work with us as equals, or watch us leave and handle our own defense. The chamber erupted in heated discussion. Representatives argued in dozens of languages, their various atmospheric requirements creating a cacophony of sounds. Yuki stood quietly, watching the chaos unfold. She knew this moment had been inevitable since the first human ship entered coalition space. The question had never been if humanity would be accepted as equals, but when the galaxy would be forced to recognize that equality. Finally, after nearly an hour of debate, Supreme Arbiter Velmarath called for order. His crystalline form had settled into a color that Yuki's translator interpreted as reluctant acceptance tinged with ongoing concern. The Coalition Council will convene an emergency session to discuss new treaty terms, he announced. However, several conditions must be met. First, human vessels will submit to regular inspections to ensure weapons systems meet agreed-upon specifications. Second, human military doctrine will be shared with coalition defense planning committees. Third, any offensive operations must be coordinated with coalition command unless responding to immediate threats. And the overseers? Yuki asked. Velmaratha's color shifted slightly. Will be removed. Human captains will have full autonomy over their vessels, subject to the same laws of conduct that govern all coalition military forces. It wasn't everything Yuki had hoped for, but it was enough. She bowed slightly. On behalf of humanity, I accept these terms as a basis for negotiation. There's one more thing, Velmarath added. The Crithian front. Your performance at New Hebron has not gone unnoticed. Several border species have requested human military assistance. The Council would like to discuss the possibility of deploying human battle groups to contested sectors. Yuki felt a smile tug at her lips. You want us to fight your war. We want you to help us fight our war, Velmarath corrected. There's a difference. You've proven that unrestricted human vessels can achieve what our forces cannot. If you're willing to commit to coalition defense, we're willing to accept your autonomy. It was a complete reversal from where they'd started. The galaxy had spent 23 years afraid of unleashed humanity. Now they were asking for exactly that, because the alternative was continued defeat against an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with. I'll need to consult with our military leadership, Yuki said. But speaking personally, I believe humanity would be honored to contribute to coalition defense efforts, provided we're treated as partners rather than subordinates. Agreed, Velmarath said, though his color suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with the arrangement. Ambassador Tanaka, you've given the Council much to consider. This session is adjourned. As the various representatives began filing out of the chamber, Yuki remained on her platform, watching the alien leaders depart. Many of them still looked afraid, uncertain about what they'd just agreed to. But fear was natural when facing the unknown. The question was whether they'd learn to trust humanity despite that fear. Her communicator chimed. It was a private message from Director Hassan Okoye on New Hebron. Ambassador, I thought you should know. The children asked me to thank the people who saved them. They wanted to know what the ships looked like, the ones that came for us. I told them they looked like wolves coming to defend the pack. They liked that. Yuki felt emotion tighten her throat. Wolves defending the pack. It was an apt description. Humanity had evolved as social predators, yes, but that predation came with fierce loyalty to the group. The galaxy had focused on the predator part and forgotten about the loyalty. She composed her response carefully. Tell the children they are welcome. And tell them that no one will ever threaten them again without answering to Earth's wolves. On the Crimson Hawk, Captain Dominic Crane received confirmation that the emergency session had concluded with preliminary agreement on new treaty terms. Around the bridge, his crew erupted in quiet celebration. Not cheering or shouting, but the subdued satisfaction of professionals who'd accomplished their mission. "Orders, sir?" Lieutenant Vera Moss asked. Dominic looked at the tactical display showing the Crithian front line. There were other colonies out there, other human settlements near contested territory. And beyond the human colonies, there were alien worlds also facing the Crithian threat. Worlds full of people who'd done nothing wrong except exist in the path of an expanding hive. "Plot a course to the nearest contested sector," he ordered. "Transmit to all human vessels in range, we're taking the fight to the Crithians. Anyone who wants to join us is welcome. It's time to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten anyone under humanity's protection." The Crimson Hawk's engines flared to life, joined by dozens of other human warships. They formed up in loose battle formations, moving with the easy coordination of pack hunters who'd finally been allowed to hunt. The leashes were off. The wolves were running. And the Crithian swarm was about to learn what it meant to face Earth's children when they stopped holding back. Across Coalition space, alien observers watched the human fleet depart with a mixture of relief and lingering unease. They had unleashed something they didn't fully understand, making a bargain born of desperation. Humanity would defend the galaxy, but on humanity's terms. History would remember New Hebron as the moment everything changed. The moment the galaxy stopped trying to cage its most dangerous species and instead learned to point them at a common enemy. The moment fear transformed into partnership. One SOS had been all it took. One desperate call from dying children. That single transmission had broken chains that had held for 23 years and unleashed a force the galaxy was still struggling to comprehend. The Deathworlders were free now, their warships slipped from their leashes. And the universe would never be quite the same again. In the end, the leashes hadn't protected anyone. They'd simply delayed the inevitable moment when the galaxy would be forced to accept a fundamental truth. When humanity says never again, they mean it with the full weight of a species that evolved to turn impossible into watch me. The children of New Hebron slept safely that night, unaware that their rescue had changed the balance of power across 1,000 worlds. They only knew that when they needed help, when death was scratching at their door, someone had come. Someone had heard them. Someone had cared enough to break every rule to save them. That was what mattered. That was what made the risk worthwhile. That was why the leashes could never be replaced.